Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and I'd like to talk briefly today about two different courses of study for families considering enrollment in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. In modern school programs and in the fake classical education programs, students have only one option, and that's to pursue a modern education. It's a K-12 curriculum. It's based on modern subjects. It's based on modern education requirements, diploma requirements, college admission minimum requirements, and things like that. And that's pretty much the standard option for all modern schools and homeschool programs. We can make some superficial changes and try to make one program appear to be different, but they're really all the same content and level of academic reach and things like that. So you've got a million modern options to choose from. And families do come into the Classical Liberal Arts Academy seeking to simply provide their children with an education that satisfies modern requirements, get a modern high school diploma, things like that. And you can do that in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. And you will likely find the content of our courses to be substantially different, I think, than what's available elsewhere. So one course of study in the academy would be to pursue modern school requirements using our courses and ultimately our high school diploma program. So that's one option, and families are welcome to do that. I think we offer a safe place for Catholic students to learn and explore things and get help that they need. So there are reasons why I could see parents being interested in seeking a modern education in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and they're welcome to do so. However, what distinguishes the Classical Liberal Arts Academy from all other programs, all other schools, what makes us unique, and we truly are unique in this, we're the only place where a Catholic student living in the 21st century can pursue a pure and real classical Catholic education. A student in a Catholic family today who would like to have the same education, the same kind of education that a saint may have had in the 1300s or the 1500s, that same education, that same classical Catholic education can be pursued in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Now, this is a real challenge for modern parents because unless parents are willing to do some work and learn to understand what classical Catholic education really is and not be distracted by nonsense that's sold on the homeschool market and called classical, if parents aren't willing to invest the time and learn what real historical classical Catholic education is, they're just not going to understand why they would choose that course for their children or what the outcome of it might be. But for parents who are willing to learn and understand how classical Catholic education is useful today in the 21st century, where things seem to be so different because we look so much at the outward appearance and superficial character of things, and we really don't look at the substance of things. It appears that so much is different, but it's really not. Unless parents are willing to get into that and understand what is the same, they really won't have any way to appreciate or work through the challenging studies in classical Catholic education. So it takes some education for the parents to be able to commit, to be able to commit intellectually, to commit motivationally, to help motivate the students, to commit financially to investing in a classical Catholic education. And that's a real challenge. And I don't expect that there are going to be many Catholic parents today who are able to make that commitment, which is why I make it available, but I don't bother people about it because I know that it's going to take a long time for classical Catholic education to be restored, especially because all of the Catholic parents today making decisions about curriculum and things like that, they've all received a modern education and they really don't know anything outside of that modern education. But nevertheless, for parents who are willing to learn and understand and appreciate what classical Catholic education really is and how it helps students today, it's possible for them in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy to give their children a pure and true classical Catholic education, the same kind of education that was enjoyed by the saints throughout history. And while we may say, we don't have the great classical schoolmasters that they certainly had in the monasteries and schools at high points in Catholic history, we do have advantages that they didn't have. Technology, for example, which allows us to be strong in areas where they struggled, and we have access to more and more materials as we work to restore all of the study materials of classical Catholic education. We can make up over time the quality and content of the studies, but we have such great advantages with technology that I think that it's possible to give kids just as good, if not a better, education than was available in most places throughout history, even though the individual teachers may have been wiser and more skilled in the actual instruction of students in these studies, because the tradition was just so firmly established and they grew up in it and learned from great teachers themselves. So we have some disadvantages, but we also have some very significant advantages, and that's why I think it's worth considering. When you think back to Solomon writing in the book of Ecclesiastes where he says, "There is nothing new under the sun," that challenges us today to ask, what does that actually mean? How can someone say there's nothing new under the sun? Solomon didn't know about electricity. He didn't know about computers and smartphones and all this stuff. How could he say there's nothing new under the sun? Isn't this stuff new? Well, if you're looking at the surface of things, yes, there's lots of things that appear to be new in modern society. But if you learn to look past the surfaces, past the superficial things, and look at the real substance or essence of things, you'll find that there's nothing new under the sun. I posted a picture recently on social media of a hawk or a falcon. I think it was a falcon. And they have this profile image of a falcon flying. And under it they have an image of the stealth bomber in the U.S. military. And you can see that the stealth bomber is actually a copy in its form of the form of a falcon in flight. And you can look at these two things and say, well, that's new. The stealth bomber is obviously new. Yes, in its outward appearances. But what are we actually trying to do in technology? We're trying to reproduce the motion and efficiency of an animal that has existed since the beginning of time. The wisdom and the science of movement and flight and motion, nothing has changed. There is nothing new under the sun. The wisdom in the design of the latest aircraft in the military is drawn from the original design in the creatures that God made in the beginning of time. There's nothing new under the sun. And if you learn to look at essentials and the substance of things and not the outward appearances or accidents of things, you'll understand how ancient wisdom is just as useful and important today in what appears to be a radically different society than it was in ancient times. That appearance is a deception. It's misleading, and it causes many families to make unwise decisions in education and deny their children access to that ancient wisdom because they think everything is different today, which is actually false. So if you're interested in giving your children a pure classical Catholic education, you can do so in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. What would the purpose of that education be? The purpose of education, according to wise men, is not to try to guess a child's future occupation and then prepare them in a specialized way for that education. That's really impossible. That's not how education works. The goal is to provide a child with the wisdom, the general universal principles and knowledge that he will be able to apply to any future occupation and have the benefit of timeless, universal wisdom that can enlighten and guide him in any practical matter that he chooses to pursue in his future life, whether that's a life as a monk in a monastery, a priest in the church, a doctor, a lawyer, an educator, a researcher, a writer, an artist, whatever. No matter what that work is, the wisdom, true wisdom, capital W wisdom, the kind of wisdom that sacred scripture talks about, that wisdom is available to him in classical Catholic education. And so it's hard for parents to understand that. It's hard for parents to see beyond the apparent changes in modern society and realize that what children need to succeed and be happy in modern society is the same exact wisdom and virtue that was pursued all throughout history through classical Catholic studies. And if you want to give your children that education, you can do so in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. It's a completely different course of studies. It's to be managed in a different way by parents. It takes a lot of study, and you're going to need to ask a lot of questions as you pursue it. But you'll see, if you trust the saints, if you trust the wise men, that they weren't ignorant, they weren't stupid, but they actually knew what was best and pursued it and provided for it. If you trust them little by little over time, you'll see the fruits of what they did and why they do what they do. If you're constantly anxious about modern society and jobs and modern requirements, and you never trust the saints, if you never trust the wise men, you're just never going to give it an opportunity to show its wisdom, to show its value. And you're going to struggle to commit to classical Catholic studies. And if you're not willing to trust men like Thomas Aquinas and St. Ignatius of Loyola and St. Augustine and Aristotle, if you're not willing to trust those men, that they're not stupid and the people running modern schools and universities are actually the wise people, if you're not willing to doubt the moderns and trust the ancients, well then you're not going to understand or appreciate. And you're never going to get far enough along into classical Catholic studies to understand their value. And realize that as you doubt the modern usefulness and application of classical studies, you're listening to a man who dedicated himself to these studies and is now running websites, publishing YouTube videos, on and on, using all of the modern media to prepare kids for vocations in life in modern society, living out a vocation in modern society. And I think that my example refutes this argument that these studies aren't useful in modern society. It's simply not true. Modern society is prepared for the explosion and restoration of these studies, but Catholics have to ask themselves whether they're going to live in anxiety, worrying about stepping out of line in modern culture, or whether they're going to look back, look at what the saints advised, and trust them. Give them the benefit of the doubt, take the steps that they recommend, and learn as they do so what the outcomes will be. So that's a challenge that I'd like to leave you with. Where can you start to learn about these things? What I recommend, if you'd like to start learning about these things, on the Academy website at classicalliberalarts.com, there's a free book that you can download online. That book was written for Catholic parents. It's very simple. I think you'll find it very clear, and I explain the history and development of classical Catholic education, starting with ancient Egypt, going all the way back to the beginning of time and tracing for you the history of the development of the pursuit of wisdom and the educational system that grew out of that and was perfected in Catholic times by the saints. And what happened since then? Where did that system go? Why did it change? I go through all of the details of what happened, what caused us to lose that system, why schools are the way they are today, and how we can restore classical Catholic education. So if you'd like to study that, I recommend you download a copy of that book. It's free. There's no catch, no strings attached. It's a free book intended to help parents. Download that book and just start reading through it, and I think you'll find it very helpful. So there are 2 different courses of study available in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. A modern course of study, which you could find elsewhere, but maybe our content might be a step above other programs. And then there's the actual Classical Catholic study program, which is available nowhere else, which I encourage all Catholic parents to learn about and consider before it's too late. I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, please get in contact. I'm happy to help. God bless your studies.